Okay, be honest. Have you ever met someone who argues so confidently, but literally makes absolute zero sense? You know exactly the type I'm talking about. They're loud, they are completely certain of themselves, and they are undeniably 100% wrong. Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're figuring out why that kind of behavior isn't just arrogance, it's actually deeply rooted in their psychology. We're going to completely decode the rarest minds out there by diving into the psychological blueprint of the top 2% thinker. By the end of our time together, you're going to understand exactly how these highly gifted individuals process information, handle their emotions, and interact with the world in a way that is totally different from the rest of the population. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the rigid mindset to understand our cognitive limits, then we'll uncover the gifted thinker blueprint, explore the burden of depth, and finally, look at how these minds protect their cognitive bandwidth. Starting off with Section 1, the rigid mindset and understanding cognitive limits. Now, to really grasp how a highly advanced mind works, we first have to contrast it with everyday habits. Enter the Dunning-Kruger effect. You've probably heard of this. It's this fascinating psychological phenomenon where people with low ability drastically overestimate their skills. And why does that happen? Because they literally lack the basic knowledge required to realize what they don't know. It's kind of wild, but it's exactly why some people speak with unshakable confidence despite having zero logic backing them up. They just can't see their own blind spots. Which leads us directly to this wild number right here, 100%. See, low IQ individuals tend to look at the entire world in absolute extremes. To them, a concept, a decision, or even a person is exactly 100% right or 100% wrong. That nuanced gray area in the middle, yeah, that just does not exist for them. And this brilliantly illustrates what psychologists call cognitive rigidity. It's basically the total inability to think flexibly or to handle nuance, complexity, and multiple perspectives. This rigidity completely stops people from being naturally curious. I mean, where a smart person naturally asks why to figure out how things work, a rigid thinker completely avoids new ideas and gets bored super easily. For them, learning actually feels like a direct threat to their ego. You can really see this stark contrast when it comes to emotional control. While smart people naturally pause, think, and then respond, low IQ thinkers tend to react impulsively and get offended at the drop of a hat. There's a direct correlation between emotional control and intelligence. These rigid individuals often confuse a simple disagreement with total disrespect. Why? Because actually debating a topic takes cognitive effort and reasoning that they just can't handle. To wrap up this rigid mindset, consider what's known as an external locus of control. We've all met someone who believes life just happens to them, right? They're always blaming bad luck, other people, or society for their issues, instead of taking an ounce of personal responsibility. This psychological trait essentially traps them, completely preventing any real solutions to their own problems. All right, let's shift gears to Section 2, the gifted thinker blueprint, inside the top 2%. So, we're moving away from the rigid mind now to explore the highly advanced psychology of gifted individuals. Only about 2% of people actually think this way. And I want to be super clear here. Being gifted isn't just about getting straight A's or having a wall full of diplomas. Actually, scratch that, it's not about that at all. It's about your brain and your emotions operating on an entirely different, highly complex level. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is the massive shift it requires. Instead of those rigid black and white extremes we just talked about, a gifted brain uses multidimensional thinking. It doesn't just process information faster, it processes it deeper, making connections that others completely miss. For a gifted thinker, it's like a giant puzzle where one single thought organically branches out and instantly leads to 10 others. The core traits of this blueprint are absolutely fascinating. First off, there's an intense emotional depth. Gifted minds feel happiness, sadness, and anger way stronger than most, which builds this profound sense of extreme empathy. Second, constant curiosity. They are always questioning the why behind literally everything. And third, they absolutely need deep explanations over surface-level answers. This endless questioning can sometimes make them come off as complicated or even rebellious to others, but honestly, it's just how they naturally learn and grow. Moving right along to Section 3, the burden of depth, the hidden costs of giftedness. Because let's be real, operating at this top 2% level isn't just some magic superpower. It comes with some really heavy psychological weights. It's a gift, sure, but it is also a weight. Because of how intensely they process the world, gifted individuals often end up feeling like completely misunderstood outsiders. They fundamentally crave deep, meaningful connection, while the people around them are often perfectly happy just chatting about surface-level stuff. That disconnect can create a very real sense of isolation. And this leads to an exhausting reality. They're constantly battling impossible standards and perfectionism, which makes them their own absolute worst critics when they inevitably fall short. Add to that a mind that literally never switches off. They are always analyzing, planning, and imagining. Even when they actively try to relax, their brain is just flooding with new ideas. It's a thrilling way to live, for sure, but man, it is heavily, heavily draining. Which brings us to our final phase, Section 4, protecting cognitive bandwidth and the digital escape. So how do these exhausted, highly aware minds survive our incredibly loud modern society? Well, you might have noticed a lot of highly intelligent people just completely vanishing from social media platforms. It relates to a concept called hedonic adaptation. That's the psychological process where your brain gets entirely used to a form of pleasure, like racking up those social media likes, until it just loses all meaning. When gifted people disconnect, it isn't out of boredom. It's a sign of profound emotional maturity. Their self-worth has literally outgrown the need for external digital validation. So the crucial point is this. They recognize that these apps are using variable reward reinforcement. Basically, they condition our minds just like slot machines, feeding us random bursts of dopamine to keep us hooked. In response, gifted thinkers actively choose digital minimalism. Deleting the apps isn't them throwing a tantrum. It's a deliberate choice to deprogram themselves. They're valuing their psychological safety over digital exposure to protect their extremely limited, precious mental energy. And when they reclaim that energy, they experience what's known as the incubation effect. This is what happens when a person's absolute best ideas surface only after they disconnect from constant stimulation. By stepping away from the noise, they reallocate their cognitive bandwidth toward things that actually compound in value over time, like deep learning, clear thinking, and genuine creativity. It's a beautiful irony, really. Disconnecting makes you vastly more creative. They shift from merely consuming the world through screens to actively shaping it. They stop letting an algorithm dictate their thoughts, trading a life of endless digital consumption for a life of deep, focused creation. There's a really powerful idea to consider here. Peace thrives in privacy. Silence can be louder than any story post. This highlights a massive sign of advanced emotional intelligence. See, this psychological detachment isn't out of resentment or anger at the modern world. It is born out of deep self-awareness. They've simply accepted that true peace absolutely does not require visibility. Which brings us to our final thought for today. Is your mind craving clarity over chaos? Because if you've ever felt that sudden, intense urge to just delete the noise, step back, and think deeply, recognize that it is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of a highly functioning mind craving real psychological growth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning the world around you, and I'll see you next time.